Within the second half of 2.8, the new resonator that we've gotten is Buling. While I don't usually do videos on 4-star resonators, Buling has so much references to Taoism and Chinese divination that I thought it'd be a shame if people who weren't aware of this didn't really know about it. So this will just be a quick video where we go through most of the symbolism references within Buling's character and moveset. So without any further ado, there's not really any spoilers here because it's not much in the story, so sit back, relax, grab something nice to drink, and if you enjoy my content, feel free to support me by subscribing or becoming a channel member. I do post video thumbnails a couple days early as a bit of a sneak peek bonus, but as always, if I miss anything, if you have any feedback, questions or discussions, feel free to drop a comment below, and let's get started. As with other Chinese-inspired resonators, we usually need to start off first with an analysis into their name. Buling's name is split up into two characters, with the first, Bu, meaning to divine. It's actually one of the oldest Chinese characters ever, because divination goes back really far in Chinese history, and the character Bu is actually shaped in that way because it resembles the shape of cracks on bones and turtle shells, which were exposed to fire and then read and interpreted. So you can basically take the first character of Buling's name to essentially be intensely tied to Chinese divination already. The second character of her name, Ling, kind of alludes to a spirit of something that bridges and exists both within the natural and supernatural worlds. And I think that kind of links to divination quite well, because sometimes divination can seem like a sort of magic, a supernatural kind of element that predicts real facets of the world and its natural way, or the Tao. But that's something we'll talk about later. So all in all, Buling's name alludes to a person who divines, acting as an agent between the natural and supernatural worlds. We'd see this through a lot of even her design, animation and stories, because she embodies basically all of the most famous Chinese divination methods. Her casket, for example, is not only shaped and etched to the design of the I-Ching bagua, but the talismans that come out of them are also typical Taoist talismans. Her dialogue lines, such as when she mentions Feng Shui, are obvious, but even stuff like when she says, "the pendant of shifting yarrow," is also a reference to how the lines in the I-Ching can be broken, unbroken, or unstable. Even in her story lore, she mentions stuff such as the peachwood sword, which are also references to Zhuangzi Taoism, where such objects are used to bless things and ward off evil spirits. These are all things and examples we'll be going through later, but if it's not immediately apparent to you, Buling's references to divination are very multifaceted. So, let's get started. Taoism is something that has not only been mentioned several times within the world of Wuthering Waves, but also on the channel. Buling, being a confirmed Taoist alongside Jianxin, means that we need to talk a little bit about this. To keep it simple, Taoism is a sort of way of life, which emphasizes a harmony and acceptance of a natural way, or a flow of existence, which is called the Tao. It's essentially a movement that advocates living in a relaxing and harmonious way, where instead of fighting against the stream of life, you flow with it and accept it. Because of these principles, you end up finding that a lot of Taoists are wandering travelers, who never truly settle in any given place. If you remember our Chou Yuan video, you may recall that his own travels are very influenced by the famous swordsman poet Li Bai, who himself was very influenced by Taoist ideals. In fact, in Chinese, there even exists a term for this archetype of people called Dao Shi Yungyou, which means literally wandering Taoist. Among the confirmed Taoists within the current world of Wuthering Waves, all three of them fit this archetype. Changli's master, Shun Mao, is a wandering Taoist, and both Zhenxin and Buling, who were taught under the same master, are also wanderers of the world. When you look at Buling's stories, the themes of Dao Shi, Yongyou, are particularly prominent. The way of the Tao, of cultivation, exists beyond the four walls of the mountain temple. The world beyond the mountain really does hold a lot to see. In addition to this, Buling's forte, which manifests in a strong acute sense to reverberations, does seem to also have Taoist roots. Practitioners of Taoism often do not rely heavily on physical eyesight, as it can be deceptive, relying instead on other, more natural senses such as hearing and a sort of mind sight. Again, if you recall my previous videos, I discussed how Chouyun and Sanhua, who are related, are both blind, but also both sense the world in terms of frequencies, having a mind sight of their own. While Buling is not exactly the same, she's not blind, she still can in fact sense reverberations, which in a way is a sort of natural flow of the world in Wuthering Waves, which does have Taoist roots as well. Within Taoism, there exist two unofficial holy books of the discipline, the Tao Teaching and the Zhuangzi. Within the Zhuangzi specifically, one of the most famous philosophical questions of Taoism is posed. If the philosopher Zhuangzi went to sleep, dreaming that he was a butterfly, then when he woke up, was he Zhuangzi who had dreamed of a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming of being Zhuangzi? This famous Taoist parable is often used to illustrate that the boundary between reality and illusion is not as clear-cut as one may think. Just like how Taoism advocates for one to channel and flow the supernatural Tao, they can guide their lives and existences in reality. The idea of dreams and reality blurring together is often paralleled with Taoism's own ideals of surpassing physical existence to merge one's self with the natural flow. The reason I bring this up is that Buling actually indirectly references this parable. Besides the coincidence that Buling works for the Blackshores and her manager is basically a dreamlike butterfly, the serendipity side quest, which has you seeing off Buling from Septimont, perfectly illustrates this principle that we just discussed. Within this quest, Buling makes the only mentions of this sort of out-of-body sensation within all of her entire lore and design. She has this idea of not knowing what is reality and illusion, and as we talked about before, Buling's name seems to suggest that she uses divination as a way to cross the boundary between the natural and supernatural worlds, hence why she's a Ling or a spirit. And considering much of the world of Wuthering Waves, which is made of reverberations, frequencies, and other oddities that are beyond the constraints of logic of the natural world, it makes sense for such a Taoist parable, and really, if you think about it, Taoism itself, to still have such an important influence in a kind of magic sci-fi world thousands of years in the future. Similar to my Augusta video, one of the principal questions with Buling comes in the form of her elements. Why exactly is Buling an electro-resonator? The basic boring answer is found in her story. Buling was trained and brought up in a sect that specialized in lightning qi cultivation. However, what you may not know is that even though it seems weirdly out of place, thunder or lightning magic, which directly translates and is called Lei Fa in Chinese, is a pretty prominent part of Taoist practice. Gaining a lot of popularity during the Song dynasty, the fundamental principle of thunder comes from many places. In the I-Ching, for example, a Chinese divination book that we'll be talking about a lot in a later chapter of its own, thunder, or hexagram 51, as well as also Taoism in general, interprets thunder as a sort of heavenly cosmic force, that punishes evil and restores balance. Because of this, Lei Fa is essentially a destructive, powerful thunder magic used for exorcism of stuff like demons, ghosts, and evil spirits. You can see in Buling's character stories, for example, that her master frames killing tacit discords with thunder as the same thing as exorcising a ghost, because this is actually what Lei Fa was used for in a lot of times in Chinese tradition. Within a lot of Taoist Lei Fa, the person calling the magic would become a sort of caller or conduit of thunder. As we mentioned before, thunder was seen as a heavenly cosmic kind of force, and as such, one specific sect of it was called Wu Lei Fa, or Five Thunder Rites, or Five Thunder Magic. This would involve calling upon the five thunders, or five directions and elements that represented heaven.
Heaven's thunder awakens, ghosts vanish. Five thunders have spoken, demons perish.
To essentially fulfill, basically, heaven's execution or smiting order on the mortal world, quite literally. This is why Buling's moveset includes a reference to this in the Five Thunders spell array, and when she casts it on the ground, it is in the shape of a crosshair, because Wu Lei Fa is figuratively, basically, an orbital lightning strike ordered from heaven. And you gotta admit, when you put it that way, that sounds really fucking dope. However, besides that, there's even more to this. Within Taoism, there is something called Neidan. From the Tang dynasty, Neidan was considered a very, very high level of self-cultivation within Taoism, where you would use your own body to sort of brew your internal energies into a kind of elixir that could help you stay healthy and even become immortal. This is why, for example, in Buling's resonance chain and in popular Chinese culture, there is a term called the earthly immortal, which basically refers to practices like Neidan, which could make a mortal immortal, right? To put it into kind of Zoomer speak, you have to imagine it kind of like this. A lot of Chinese cultivation, as we just said before, has a goal to make you immortal, right? So a lot of people would brew potions and elixirs and stuff and then drink it. But Neidan is like turning your own body into a brewing stand and then consuming the potion or elixir directly and internally within your body, which is why Neidan is such a powerful Taoist technique. We can see this very clearly with Buling, because the process in which an individual would conduct Neidan, according to basically every single manual there is on it, such as for example what we know today as the Zhonglu system of Neidan, or internal alchemy as it is sometimes translated in English, is always comprised of three distinct stages. First, you need to collect and refine your primordial qi. Then, you must combine your yin and yang energy. And finally, once this happens, then you will essentially ascend, and heaven, earth, and mind will unite as one entity. If you read Buling's mindset, this three-step process is actually perfectly represented. When Buling first attacks a target, she casts a 5 thunder spell array, which causes all resonators to enter the primordial qi state. Then, when a resonator on a team casts an intro skill, this transforms into the yin and yang state. When another intro skill is further cast, this transforms again, finally, into the heaven, earth, and mind state, which perfectly matches the 3 stages of Neidan. Now, the reason why we talk about Neidan is that during the Song dynasty, when Lei Fa, or thunder magic, became really popular, a bunch of Taoist masters basically had an idea. If you could use Neidan and essentially brew your body's energy into an elixir that could make you immortal or something, couldn't you also push that magic energy out of your body to use as a kind of offensive weapon? This train of thought culminated in a practice called Neidan Wai Feng Yi Lei Bu, which basically means releasing your inner elixir to command thunder magic. And this type of offensive Neidan art is exactly the principle that Buling uses to cast Lei Fa, or thunder magic. When, for example, she casts her ultimate to flick a coin in the same way as that of the one scientific railgun, she is essentially channeling a purified internal energy to cast an enormous amount of thunder magic at a precise location. And all of this, at the end of the day, is essentially the weaponized form of the highest level of Taoist self-cultivation. Being one of the oldest Chinese divination methods originating from the Zhou dynasty around 900 BC, the I-Ching, or the Book of Changes, is one of the oldest divination methods and is unsurprisingly one of also the biggest influences in Buling's design. The I-Ching involves the bagua, or 8 trigrams, which are then combined into pairs to form 64 hexagrams, which can be interpreted in order to get advice or hints of any question or issue that a divinator has. This method usually involves flipping 3 coins in order to determine the 2 trigrams and subsequent hexagram, which of course is incorporated into Buling's design. In Buling's moveset, her rotation is built around essentially the process of I-Ching divination. You collect 2 trigrams, Zhen or thunder, and Gen or mountain. Buling's kit essentially completely revolves around how exactly you combine these 2 trigrams, which results in 4 combinations that each give you a different hexagram. For example, if you place mountain over thunder, you will get hexagram 27, or jaws, which symbolizes good fortune and nourishment. The thunder in this trigram symbolizes a sound that heralds rain and the growth of crops, but can also be a warning to be careful with your mouth, with what you speak and with what you eat. Essentially, this is a hexagram that basically symbolizes that good fortune must be tempered with carefulness, which when you think about how in Buling's moveset, it does a huge amount of electro damage, kinda makes sense. It is a kind of fortunate omen, but you also have to be careful, because once Buling casts it, you consume all your power and are weak afterwards. However, when you combine the thunder over mountain trigram, you will get hexagram 62, oftentimes translated as minor surplus. Within this hexagram, the thunder is an image of slight superiority, like thunder over a mountain. An individual will have a slight advantage over others, but it isn't necessarily big enough for them to take immediate action. This actually makes a lot of sense for Buling's move that corresponds to this hexagram, because she essentially makes it because within this move, she does a less amount of damage in return for more vibration damage, where she is trying to take an advantage before executing a stronger attack. If you place 2 mountain trigrams together, you'll get hexagram 52, or stillness. The 2 mountains in this hexagram essentially symbolize peace, of not leaving a certain place, just like the solid and unmoving mountains. Buling's attack of this combination heals the entire team instantly in one fell swoop, which I'm assuming, like a mountain, is a sort of one and done kind of thing. This contrasts quite a bit with the final combination of Buling's 2 trigrams, which is 2 thunder trigrams, which will then give you hexagram 51, also called thunder. Thunder is something that sounds repeatedly, but it in itself is not dangerous, which symbolizes that one needs to steady themselves despite being in a pressuring or tense situation. This is a good match to Buling's final trigram attack, which heals the entire team, but instead of instantly, like the Twin Mountain version, it pulses, like thunder, once every second for 8 seconds. You can take it both as thunder, but also, from my own perspective, as steady breathing, calming yourself even in the midst of a bad situation. Beyond just her moveset, Buling also has an idle animation which references the trigrams and hexagrams of the I-Ching. Within it, you can see Buling sighing in defeat when she connects 2 trigrams to form hexagram 4, before getting excited when it slides over and becomes hexagram 23. This actually has a really simple, if not funny meaning. Hexagram 4, or sprouting, or new grass, symbolizes that anything that is new or first starts out needs to be cared for and watched over. In this context, it is basically telling Buling that she needs to get to work. However, hexagram 23, or peeling, provides the image of a mountain and earth, which is meant to mean that just like how it is impossible to peel a mountain from the earth, it can also be meant to mean that it is not fortunate for someone to go away or start something new. In Buling's context, this basically just means that her divination is telling her that it's not auspicious to start work right now, and essentially the gods or whatnot told her that she can basically keep slacking off, which is pretty funny. In this section, I'll quickly talk over some stuff that don't require a lot of drawn out explanations. Firstly, for example, we can talk about Feng Shui. Feng Shui is a sort of practice that advocates the harmonizing of all the elements in environment and space, according to the 5 elements in the Bagua, or 8 trigrams, which we talked about already in the previous chapter. However, it's not a big influence on Buling's design as much as others, so I won't talk about it too much. During the Septimon story, Buling hands you a copper mirror, which in Chinese culture is often associated with the 8 trigrams, which we've already talked about, and is used to reflect away evil spirits, as it was act as a truth piercer, or a way to see into the real state of things, which is exactly how it's used in the story, to gaze into the truth of past situations. Within Buling's mindset, if you initiate a heavy attack without 2 trigrams, you essentially fail the I-Ching divination and trigger an effect called Ghost Gate Omen, where Buling zaps herself. Within Taoism, ghost gates are believed to be kind of gates to hell. So while Lei Fa is essentially calling down the thunder of heaven, Ghost Gate Omens are basically the opposite, kind of like being punished by hell. And well, that's it. For a 4-star resonator, Buling has a lot of references and thought put into her design, and of course she is a very based character. But with that, we are finished. If I missed anything, or if you have any questions or criticisms, feel more than free to drop a comment, but besides that, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next time.